All right. It's our Designing for Music series. We have our friends here, Spencer Drate, along with Judith Salavetz. Um, we're going to continue our discussion on album covers, which I find fascinating. There's nothing better than be able to listen to your music and read that album, look at the artwork that comes with it, and pull it all apart and read all the credits, all the information. It really, you gain knowledge of the music. But there's so much in regard to the album covers and the sleeves that's left off. That's why we have to have our experts here. So, Spencer and Judith, welcome. This has been a
Thank
lot
you.
of fun. We're getting a lot of people that are commenting on these shows. They like it and they just can't get enough of it. So, let's start off with part three of our series, and we're just go right over to
I'll,
Spencer.
I'll,
Kick it off.
I'll start telling the stories, and then I'll tell Judith will come in, and you, of course, Zach. We'll start off. These covers, by the way, are in our Art of Vinyl cover show, which Zach did the voiceover and Patrick Bombarek produced and put together. And they're the best album covers and 45s in the show, 12-minute view, which you can see on YouTube. So I'll start off with this interview three with a list of 10 covers of other designers. We approached my design in the first interview. The second interview, we approached Judith and my design together. And now we're going into the category of other designers. So I start off with one of the Grammy winners in packaging, Robert Rauschenberg, limited edition, Speaking in Tongues. This was limited edition, and as I said, won a Grammy award. And if you're familiar with Rauschenberg, his paintings delve with montages and overlays, and the same treatment is in this package. If I open it up, you'll see there are layers of discs in different colors that are overlaid with each other. This would be one, transparent almost, and let's make it the second one. Second one's based on in the cover, and so they overlay each other, and then of course you have the record underneath those two. So that's basically the album, and again, it won a Grammy. There were only two packages that Talking Heads award won a Grammy. One was the one I worked on with the Talking Heads Hero Music, which was nominated for a Grammy, and this one won a Grammy. And that's for any feedback on this for you guys?
Yeah, well, the album itself peaked at number 15 on the Billboard 200. I remember that. I think it was 1983. And the track listing, which I have right here, is I think at one point it becomes the commercial success for the Talking Heads. Up until that point, most of us knew Psycho Killer, Life During Wartime, and maybe a few other tracks that we'd hear on the radio. Then there was me, the Talking Heads kid at St. John's University, who used to drive around with the cassettes playing in his 72 Triumph Spitfire. And I can remember going to Jack's Music Store in Red Bank, New Jersey to get Talking Heads Speaking in Tongues based on the lead track, which was side one, Burning Down the House. Then you have Making Flippy Floppy, Girlfriend is Better, which is a favorite of my daughter, who's turning 20 tomorrow. I got a girlfriend who's better. Yeah. Happy birthday. Yeah, happy birthday, Sophie. Slippery People, I Get Wild, Wild Gravity, side two, or B, Swamp, Moon Rocks, Pull Up the Roots, and This Must Be the Place, Naive Melody. The album itself, you know, a lot of people always think that you're going to get an hour of music on these albums. There's only 40 minutes of music on it, but man, incredible tracks as far as I'm concerned. And I do remember the album cover, and it was a number of years before I figured out that they broke up the word speaking in tongues. It goes to make up the whole word. I'm like, oh, wow, man. How cool is that? In regard to that special packaging that you showed us and the different discs, did you get that in the store? Did you buy it in the store? How did you come across that? It's an interesting story in itself.
I bought it. I actually bought it. Well, in the days of special packaging, which is part of this, I remember going to stores, and some of these special packages, by the way, were not to be sold, but they were sold in a lot of record stores. And I forgot how I bought this actually a long time ago. So I acquired it years ago. I can't remember exactly where, to tell you the truth, but I might have went to a record store and purchased it. In those
Yeah,
days,
I would.
you know,
I would have gotten that myself if I knew that that was available. I had no idea. I mean, the idea of taking the actual picture disc, if you want to talk about that, where you take the
yeah.
vinyl and you create artwork with the vinyl. I could be wrong, but I think that was really around the 80s, right? When that started to happen, maybe around.
Well, the special packaging in history starts in the 70s. That's where, and especially they take up in the Roger Dean, Aubrey Powell album cover album book series. In the 70s, they show you the die cuts in those book in the first book, and the 70s had all kinds of stuff like the strawberry die cut, Rod Stewart whiskey glass, the Jay Giles telephone die cut into a telephone, etc., etc. Cheech and Chong. It goes on and on. But the 70s is the era where they spent a lot of money, die cuts all over the place. That's an important thing to know. So it's actually the 70s. But special packaging evolves going into the 80s a little bit. And then you get, of course, after the CDs, you get your special CD packaging, which Judith and I did an amazing show in New York in 1996. Some of these pieces went to a Cooper Hewitt mixed messages show. Judith and I designed the metal box for Lou Reed, the peel up banana for the Velvet Underground. That segment of special packaging and CDs is very interesting. And in the late 80s and early 90s, the record companies would compete with each other to put out the best special package. They spent a lot of money. I mean, like I got a Christmas edition from Sony in a wooden box, gorgeous wooden box with two CDs just for Christmas. And, there were a lot of junk, but amongst those were a lot of good ones. And Judith and I picked out the best, did a major show. Line was around the block in 1996 at the One Club in New York. I was in Smithsonian Magazine interviewed. I was on MTV talking about it. We were very visionary, Judith and I, in that respect. No one else was talking about it. We would do articles on it. We were ahead of the time in that. But it's about what that was. It was very similar to the
if I may, you had said you wish you had bought that album cover. That album, actually. I read something about Andy Warhol, actually, that when he talked about this album cover, he said he bought that album at Tower Records. I don't know if you know.
Oh, yeah, Tower Records. I know the Tower Records in the Village, and that went out of business just a couple years ago. Yeah.
Right. This information came from Andy Warhol's diary, and in it when he wrote about this particular album cover, because he was friends with Rauschenberg, of course, and he told Rauschenberg in his diary. He writes that he mentioned to Rauschenberg, because Rauschenberg actually only got paid $2,000 for designing that album cover. He told Rauschenberg, "What? You should have been paid $25,000 for it."
At least.
Yeah, so that's a cute little.
On the plus side, at least I had the same eye for it that Andy Warhol had, right? That was when you showed it to me. I'm like, I have to have that. So now I'm going to track it down on eBay and see how much it costs.
Spencer, you think you got to know about the album. First of all, it's very important. It had a 50,000 run. That was the run of
limited edition.
Oh, yeah. Good luck in finding those.
Right. Yeah.
So because of the limited edition, it's 50,000. And Rauschenberg, there was no feedback from Talking Heads on this. Chris Franz writes about it in the Remaining in Love book that they just gave him the project. That was it. They didn't even look over it. They had no feedback on it. It was totally Robert's package, and that's what evolved into that.
Let's go to the next. I think you have an album or a sleep. Buddy Holly, right? Or
yes. This is a very iconic cover. First of all, you should know in those days, they did not give credit to the photographer or the designer when they did album covers. And it's a very it's a very interesting shot. It's almost like an illustration photograph. That's what really attracted me to it. In sepia tone, it's an outrageous shot, and it doesn't really. The thing that's interesting is it doesn't reflect the songs in it, and they're all Buddy Holly hits in it. It's one of his first albums, but it's like an incredible cover. And the simplistic design of it really attracted me, especially the photograph, which, like I said, it's almost like an illustration photograph. You can't tell. And of course, without the sunglasses. So
Right.
I don't think someone wrote about this that it wasn't really appreciative of the way he looked, but it's a great cover and photograph.
What are some of the tracks in that album?
Let me see here. We got very famous I'm Gonna Love You Too, Peggy Sue, which we know, Look at Me, Listen to Me, Valley of Tears, Ready Teddy, Side 2, Every Day, Mailman Bring Me No More Blues, Words of Love, very famous, You're So Square, Rave On, which is another great song, and
Oh, yeah.
and Little Baby. So, I mean, I used to wear the grooves out of this album, literally,
Right.
when I was younger. And it's just a great album compilation too.
Just
right?
to make a point of how important the information on the album is, besides the songs that we hear, do they credit the Crickets at all? Do they tell you who the musicians are? What kind of information
Oh no,
is
there's
given on an album?
it's just the front and the back. And on the back you have some sort of drawing of a guitar, obviously, lyrics.
Right.
He's alive in Lubbock, Texas. He's alive now. And on top of that, there's no credits to the musicians at all. It's just a song stack. That's
Yeah.
it. End of story. No intersleep, nothing. Judith, do you have any feedback on this?
Only that it's very interesting if you notice the type on the album is in the middle of the cover, which is really unusual in those days.
Sure.
For a record company to agree to put any copy in the middle was very unusual, because 99.9% of the time, the record companies would require you to, the designers, to put the name of the musician and the name of the album at the very top of the album.
Right,
so that can be viewed while you're, looking through it at the record album stores. But in this
Judith,
case, it's really unusual. I don't know why, but
what's your take, Judith, on the photography of that? The lighting and the shading.
No, I
and
agree with you that it gives one, when you said it was a somber feel. There is this very serious. It really doesn't give a feel for what you're going to be listening to, which is very
true.
The music somehow, for me, it doesn't match with. It's a wonderful cover.
The article that I read was on a top 10 album cover list. But the thing that was written about is what we all said, Judith and Zach said, is that it doesn't relate to the music in the album at all. It's like Peggy Sue's in there. It totally doesn't relate to the sound of Peggy Sue. It's like totally different. But anyway, that's the story of this cover.
Fantastic.
The next cover is So by Peter Gabriel, designed by Peter Saville, one of the great designers of our time. This is the album without the So in the front, which is normal. Usually you see So, the type next to the photograph, but I love this cover because it's a photograph shot by Trevor Key.
Trevor Key.
Trevor Key, the photographer. And it's a great photograph, and it stands alone. So that's another interesting thing I loved about the photo.
But Spencer, there was also a typographer involved with that one.
Yes,
typographer.
Right. Yeah, exactly right.
Do you have his name over there? It's Brett.
I don't have it.
Brett Wickens was the typographer, and I don't have the album in front of me, but hopefully they gave him some credit.
Also, I think there are different versions of that album cover, because I do remember seeing some with So on the top in blue, Peter Gabriel over at what would be his right shoulder.
That's right.
The left part of the right part of the album.
That's right, Zach. That was the most common way you bought it. But I saw this online, And I said, oh my God, this is so different. And the photograph is so strong that by itself, it's really incredible. It's like our Joan Jett cover with the Dieter Zell thing, Judith, remember? So it's such a strong photograph. I mean, this is, if you have a dynamic photograph, this is where it goes. You know, that's the answer to that.
And I think for this album, So by Peter Gabriel, in the photo on the cover, we finally get to see the real Peter Gabriel. Usually he was hiding behind some sort of theatrics. When it was released, Hotter Than Pepper Pudding. I mean, this was what put Peter Gabriel on everybody's stereo across the country. And I'm going to tell you some of the numbers. It went to number 1 on the Billboard 200. It went to number 1 on the UK album charts, number 2 in Switzerland, number 2 in Sweden, Norway, number 1, New Zealand, number 1. And Japan, it didn't do too well. It went to 31. Number 1 on the Italian charts, number 12 on the French charts, Dutch album charts, number 1, Canadian album charts, number 1, Austrian album charts, number 1, 5 on the Australian Kent Music Report. So we're talking about a world famous, worldwide smash album by Peter Gabriel that had Red Rain on it. I do believe Sledgehammer.
Yeah, big time.
Yep. I'll get the track listing. It's better to look at it. Yeah, Red Rain was the first cut in side 1, followed by Sledgehammer. Don't Give Up, featuring Kate Bush.
Oh, good one.
On side 2, In Your Eyes, Mercy Street, Big Time, which I really like playing on the radio, and number 8, the final track on side 2 was We Do What We're Told. So
and In Your Eyes is one of my favorite songs. It has a beautiful melody line. The lyrics are great. It's a beautiful song, right, Zach?
Oh, it is a great song. And Don't Give Up with Kate Bush is another great song that usually goes underneath the radar.
Yeah, true.
So, the story goes that when Peter Seville, the designer, he was so he was given the cassette of before it became an album. He was given the cassette to listen to the music, and when Peter heard the music, he said, "Oh my God, this is going to be a hit!" And he was really excited to work on it because of that. I mean, he was also very lucky, Peter Seville. He was working for a record company, Fantasy Records, that gave him full, speed ahead, do whatever you want, creativity. I mean, just do it. And so he was.
I kind of agree with that. Like letting the artists do whatever they do. Like if I'm good at being on the radio, let me be on the radio. If you're good at, designing artwork, let you design the artwork. If you're good at editing, you edit it. We're going to move on to the next album. But before we do that, before we get to Let It Bleed, you brought up something very interesting. You guys, Spencer and Judith, as artists, what was the general, I guess, method of designing your album covers or sleeves? Did you listen to the music first, or sometimes it didn't matter, or sometimes it was just the artist?
No,
always
listen to the music. That's a cardinal rule with us. I know that. And to get the feeling. I mean, if you don't do that, forget about it. You're not a designer. I mean, you really have to get the feel of what's going on the inside, and hopefully that connects. And, it's the integration, which I've always talked about. Typography design is so important to making the elements of great design. It's the typography connected to the visualization, whatever it is, photography or illustration. That connection makes a great design, and it's a gift. I mean, Judith and I are very fortunate. Really, it shows in our work to have that gift. Not everybody has that. Seriously, but you can learn so much, and the rest is what you have. And we've enjoyed our life doing it, and people appreciate our work. Thank God.
When I design when we design together, I always thought about music. It's like it's almost like a mathematical equation where music is one number plus art, that's another number, so that's 1 + 1 plus. I always found that fashion was very important. It helped me at least to come up with ideas and concepts. So would be number 3. So music plus art plus the fashion will give you a harmony in design. It creates this amazing harmony that, where it comes from for different musicians. I don't know. It's something magical that does happen, but I'm always looking at that equation: music plus art plus the fashion of the times. So that's just from, subjectively speaking.
I'm going to have Judith talk about this because I was on the phone with her and had an incredible story. Now, let me show you the front and back so you know what's going on here. It's a cake stacked up with the records. It's incredible cover of front and back. Judith, tell us this story, which you told me. It's very intriguing.
Well, so this is really interesting about this cover. If you notice, it's a cake, right? So what they did at the time, the designers, they got this person. Her name was Delia. What was it? Delia Smith, and she was a cooking writer. She recipe books, all sorts of food. But she was very well known in England at the time. Very popular. She was almost like an icon of sorts. And she made the cake, Delia Smith. The cake that, this very famous cake. So
the designer on this is Robert Brownjohn.
Brownjohn, yes.
Yeah. And just what Judith said to complement that, the real story, which I thought was very intriguing. I mean,
what's that one thing, Judith, about Let It Bleed as an album that really speaks to you the most? Or should I say sings to you the most?
Oh, I mean, there isn't one thing. If you look at that art, the cover art, there's so many things going on in there. I just love. I mean, it looks delicious, to tell you the truth. When you first look at it, it looks like I want to eat this. It's so yummy looking, and the music is, essentially delicious. And there's a record company actually that was called Delicious.
For me, it was like every song track was incredible. That's the other part of it, right, Judith? Every song track was incredible. Yeah. So that's another thing. Not all albums have that. That's what makes this album extraordinary.
Yeah, it's one of those albums where you have no desire to skip over any of the tracks. That's few and far between. I could only think of a handful of records.
If I may say this, in those days, it wasn't just it took a lot of effort, a lot of work, a lot of people coming together with various talents to create something like that. It didn't just happen, and those kinds of things, you don't hear about that happening today. It's kind of sad to me that, it's this form of art that it's kind of lost. It doesn't happen in the same way. And of course, there was a lot of money behind it, like with the Stones. I mean, money was of no object in anything, in any part of the making of the album, whether it was where they recorded it and who was going to be on it and the art itself. I mean, I think, money had no, it didn't matter.
Right.
That doesn't happen today, unfortunately. We don't have the same kinds of incredible masterpiece album covers. That to me is a masterpiece album cover.
Right. It is.
Followed it up with another masterpiece album that we're going to get to, Sticky Fingers. There's great background information, and one of the questions is, who's that a photo of? And I just want everybody to know, front and back, that's me.
Oh my God, the mystery solved.
Let me tell you the story. Okay, let me start with the story. We got to start with the story. Okay, so this is where it goes. The album was conceived by Andy Warhol at a party, and he told Mick Jagger in a 1969 party that you should do an album cover with jeans and a zipper. That's how it starts. Then it proceeds to Craig Braun, who's the art director, designer for Atlantic, and he put this album together, really. So Warhol is credited with the zipper concept, but Craig Braun is the designer. Then we have compilations of Polaroids of the front and back, and to this day, nobody knows who the model was. That's a big thing. Zach, another part of the story I forgot that's very important is that Mick Jagger wanted a real zipper. This is very important. So Craig applies a zipper on the album, but in the wrong place. So when it was packaged, all the albums were damaged. Most of the albums were damaged. So they had to replace the zipper in another part of the album cover to alleviate that. And of course, later you have the zipper, not a three-dimensional form, just printed on the cover.
Right.
But that's important to know.
My mom got me the picture disc of that particular album with Brown Sugar on it when I was, maybe in my late teens, early 20s. My mom was so cool. She found that at a record store. Now, that particular album cover, I do know one thing about it. It wouldn't fly everywhere throughout the world. In Spain, they have a completely different cover. He's in a, fingers are popping out of a can of Fowler's.
Yeah,
right?
that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and it had the can opener on front, and it was filled with blood and fingers, and it was really kind of weird.
Yeah.
So that's how they got around with that. So if you really want to add to your collection, go find the Spanish LP version of that.
Right.
Believe it or not, I actually have it. I mean, obviously that's me. Look at that butt. So in case we miss something, retell the story, because right here on the information I have on this, see, this is where the album information is really crucial. And Spencer, you talked about this in the past. A lot of times they don't give you the background on the cover, and it keeps there's gaps.
Craig Braun, who, by the way, speaks at the Making Vinyl event every year. He's a very profound art director. He worked on Cheech and Chong, a lot of great covers. He really put that cover together. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. He put the design of that cover together. Andy, like I said, presented the concept of a zipper on a jean. The Polaroids came from the factory that were composited. But basically, Craig put that cover together. Andy had the concept of the zipper with the jeans, and that's it.
And of course, the great tracks in that album as well. It was one of those albums, I think it was in the top 5 around the world, much like Let It Bleed. You got Can't You Hear Me Knocking? I don't know anybody that didn't buy Sticky Fingers because of mainly the album cover, especially the girls went crazy over that,
And I have a flat cover. The one that opens up, there's actually more going on. It's like the zipper with part of the jean opens up into this other thing, so it's kind of like a more three-dimensional package. I have the flat, what you call a flat cover. It doesn't have any opening, but it's incredible cover. I mean, the Stones are really into visuality. If you go through the line, I got some 45s that are amazing that they did.
All right, let's move on to the next one. This is Mind Games from John Lennon.
Tell you a little bit of the culture around this album. John was having a problem with Yoko. He was taking out May Pang at this point for a couple of weeks. The FBI he thinks they're after him because of the staying in this country thing that was going on with him at that point. And anyway, he put this was going on all at once, by the way. Anyway, he put this album cover together, pieced together photographs. The front and back are exactly alike, almost, except there's a rainbow at the top on one side and clouds on the other. But I thought it was a great piece of art, and that's what attracts me. The type is very minimal, you see in the corner, and I think it's a beautiful cover. He was really good at artwork, John. If you knew John Lennon's artwork,
it kind of speaks about his, his mental state at the time, because he was actually Yoko threw him out.
The artwork is beautiful. The concept of the album is great.
It's interesting. Look at Yoko, the size of Yoko compared to John. Now, Judith, isn't that psychological? He really loved Yoko, but he makes her really big on the cover, actually, in size, right? He's a little guy, right?
Well, she's taken over his life, his thoughts, in his mind. She's in his thoughts.
Psychiatrists would love this cover. Okay, next cover.
Right.
Next cover is a famous one, the first Led Zepp cover, designed by George Hardy, based on the 1937 photograph by Speer of the Hindenburg disaster. And that's basically it. He posterized the photograph. Very simple cover, but very iconic in our life, a rock cover. And I really love this cover. I really love the graphics.
As opposed, in contrast, what I have on CD, still in its wrapper, the Japanese import that I found.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit hard to translate. the tracks on the album. Okay.
Oh my God, the tracks are Good Times, Bad Times.
All right.
Baby, I'm Gonna Leave. This is an incredible album. You Shook Me, Dazed and Confused, Your Time Is Gonna Come, Black Mountain, Communication Breakdown, I Can't Quit You, Baby. How Many More Times? I mean, I ran out. I heard this album at a party. I'll never forget this. Zach, it's like You Know Who You Are or Judith. I was at a party. I heard this album. I freaked out. I never heard anything like this. The production, the sound. I ran out and bought the album, just like what the kids do. Run out and buy the album. This album was really profound at that time.
And there's a couple of things about this album, and the design features. Where in the front you have the famous picture of the Hindenburg disaster, taken by. You mentioned his name again.
Sphere.
Okay.
It goes under the name of Sphere. P-S-G-R-E.
And then on the back, you're introduced to members of the band. I believe it should be on there, right?
It's very low key. The back cover is very low key. Yeah.
And I'm surprised that John Bonham, he's wearing this Irish sweater. I mean, they just look like kids down the block, with the exception when you look at Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones and Robert Plant. John Bonham looks like the everyday cat that you would hang out with in school, right?
I like it simple. That's it. It's a title. Thank God it's just them as a title, and the rest is the photograph. So it's very, it doesn't play a bit. And look at the color; it makes the photograph stand out. Judith, do you have any feedback on this?
Yeah, no. Well, there's an example where you have the title at the very top, right? At the very top part of the album. But I love this cover for everybody's used the word simplicity so many times.
Yep.
It's both a work of art, but yet in a very simple form. And if you look at this cover, and this is their first, the very first album for them.
Yeah, it's their debut album of
their
Led
debut
Zeppelin.
album. Why not put every record company that's on the face of the earth would have said, let's put their faces on the cover.
Right.
So put their faces on the cover. But, I know they got away with, not having their faces, but a piece of art.
Well, they definitely were different. And I would say this as a challenge, listen to How Many More Times. There is old video of Led Zeppelin's first concert tour, I think in Europe somewhere. You got to check it out. It's amazing. And by the way, since we're on the topic, Robert Plant is an amazing harmonica player, amazing musician. And I think, he kind of doesn't, I know he gets respect for being part of Led Zeppelin, but he deserves respect on his own. There's an article on newhdusa.com, Digging Deeper, with Robert Plant that features some of his solo videos, and it's tremendous. One other thing about this album on the back side, the flip side, where you see the members of the band right next to produced by Jimmy Page, and maybe something to the right about Warner Brothers, you'll see in the middle a drawing. Do you have that on yours, Spencer?
No.
There's all right, because in the issue I got from Japan, it's like a black and white drawing, simple, like pen and ink of the Led Zeppelin, and I don't even know what it's coming out of, but it's kind of cool. So if you ever get that on the box set, or if you get the Japanese import, the album, those are little details. You can see the distinctions there for yourself. All right, let's move on to the next one.
Okay,
that was a good chat about Led Zeppelin.
Let me tell the story about this, because this is really interesting. We got a famous cover. I was actually, my Talking Heads I co-designed with Take Me to the River Sleeve was in a 2010 MoMA show with music graphics, and this cover was in it. I got so attracted to this. I think it's one of the great. The illustration is by Raymond Pettibone, which he was written up in a MoMA magazine article about this cover. But this is the important thing. The illustration is based on a photograph at a motor. They're witnesses at. This is a true story. They're witnesses photographed in a car, 1966, at a murder trial of a woman who killed her child. What they call the Moore murders. And what the story is that the woman in the illustration was her sister murdered her child, and the guy in the illustration, listen to this, he was at the murder. His sister actually asked him to help him bury the body. And what he did is he called the police. And so this is a crazy story, murder story, based that this photograph, this illustration is based on. Sonic Youth, called Goo, album called Goo.
And they have actually a lot of albums out, Sonic Youth.
Yeah.
Goo is the one you're referring to, but if you look at the history of Sonic Youth, I'll say this: you might not recognize many of the songs, but their album covers are flipping awesome, and they don't stick to just one type of artwork. They change it up. There's a couple of them that are drawn, and then I think their first album was Beatlesque. Like you have a picture of the whole band on the front, like Meet the Beatles. It was like kind of that.
I want to tell you, the 45s that I have, there's a couple of Sonic Youth. They're outrageous. I mean, they're totally different. Like just like you said, Zach, they go into a different visual plane that are totally off the wall. And I have a very striking 45 that's we're going to show in our other interviews, Sonic Youth. But this illustration really tries. Judith, you have feedback on this?
No, just that, I mean, they were an underground band, and they were very successful in the 80s. And this particular cover, it speaks of, I don't know, grunge. Dare I say that word? I don't know if their music was really grunge. But
well, I think they're an earlier influencer.
Yeah.
When I see that, it reminds me of cool comic books. I mean, and then look at the insert. Look at that.
Yeah. Very
That's really
Indian,
awesome.
Very Indian.
This is the cheat inside, Zach and Judith.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That's what makes or breaks some of these album packages when you
Yeah,
buy them.
I know it's interesting.
Goodies.
Listen, as a designer, I'm seeing, first of all, black and white on the front and back, and then I'm seeing color hit you right in the face when you pull it out. That's really intriguing. That's really good design.
Yeah, that contrast, we love that.
Yeah, that is cool. That mixes it up. Also, they have about 15 different albums out, I think, Sonic Youth altogether. I mean, I played them on the air, some tracks when they became more commercial, maybe the late 80s, early 90s.
It
but
lasted for a long time, Zach. I think about 10 years, right? Am I right?
Over that. Yeah, I think I'm going to say 1982 to 2009, maybe. That's a long time. That's a very long time. What's the next one that we got? Because we got two more that we're going to do, and then I have a question for both of you.
Yeah, this is
wow.
a designer, Vaughn Oliver, great group. And look at the front and back. Incredible design.
I love that album cover so much.
Right, Judith. Judith saw this, and she flipped out, and so did I. I mean, this is front to back an incredible album cover by Vaughn Oliver, who was in our designing of music.
We love Vaughn Oliver.
We love. He passed away, by the way, this past year, which is passed away.
2020 has been such a great year.
And he was from the record company 4AD, and so they put out a lot of great stuff, and he designed them, like the Pixies. So this is a great cover. I think very exceptional. Very exceptional.
What I like about it is the masking tape, or I should say duct tape appeal to it. Like you can fix anything and make anything with duct tape. I love that.
Yes, beautiful. Right, Judith?
But in a royal manner, presenting it to you in a silver.
Judith, do you what do you get out of the symbols that you see? You got the hypodermic needle, you got the toothbrush, you got the yellow haze around the toothbrush, you got the
except that Vaughn Oliver was the most incredible graphic designer that ever lived, and it's hard for me to be able to get into his brain, his mind, but he was so I was reading a little bit about him before we did this. We got on here, and I read that he wanted to be an album cover designer from the time that he was a teenager. That's what he wanted to do.
That's a great goal.
I'm doing that, and he became successful at it.
And I got to tell you something. We profiled Vaughn in a 1992 book called "Designing for Music" with like Peter Seville and other great designers, John Berg, and nobody knew who he was, Judith, at that time. He hadn't got to the United States. He was young. He had done the Pixies. He started that whole series, but he was so dynamic, and later years he became very famous, right? But we really exposed him to the world. I mean, no one had him in a book at that time.
I like in the typography where you get some of that masking tape. It takes out one of the letters, but you still know what the word is. It's on the other side, the front side, Spencer. You see, right in that ultra vivid.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I can't read the rest of it, but you know, because of the camera, I would guess that I would immediately know what it says if I was able to see the whole thing. So the point being, it's really interesting how he's able to take the masking tape design and put it over the typography,
Right.
yet you still get the full meaning. That is really incredible. Even though something's covered. Hey, kids, something's covered, but you get the full meaning. All right, let's move on to our next one.
The last one is the name John Posh, who, by the way, is in our Designing for Music book again, a profile. And now he did the great album covers for a group called Art of Noise, a whole series. We have a 45 going to show later on him. He's another outstanding designer. We're talking about outstanding like Peter Seville. We're talking about John Burke and these names. Even us, Judith and I. But this is his cover for one of the Art of Noise covers. He chose a fashion photographer to do the cover to get the feeling of fashion. That's what he says. And the art and typography is extraordinary on this cover. I mean, it really blends with the cover. And I think it's an extraordinary combination of, you talk about typography and art, you know what I'm saying?
You can follow Spencer and Judith on Facebook.com. They'll tell you how to do that. All right. So how do we follow you on social media, guys? If they want to get a hold, somebody needs a great logo.
We have on Facebook, we have Spencer Drate / Judith Salavetz to see our site. Let me come in here and tell you that everybody out there that we're going to finish with our 4th of a series interviews on album covers. And then we're going to proceed with Zach's idea, which I thought was fabulous, on 100 best 45 sleeves, part of them in our Art of Vinyl cover show and others not, but a great array of 100 of the best 45 album sleeves, which everybody shouldn't miss on that.
Yes, and what we'll do on that is we'll talk about some of the background information on the recording, what album it's off of originally, maybe some of the chart action, some of the things I might remember of getting the 45 with the hooky dookie in the middle. If you don't know what a hooky dookie is, we'll explain. That's what we called. That comes from Scott Muni. That's what he called that little. He passed me the hooky dookie. Thank you very much for joining us. Next week we're going to have
next
we're going to have the famous Patrick Van Buren.
Yeah. We got to have interview 4 with Patrick because he's going to talk about with us the making of the Art of Vinyl cover show, which Zach was involved with also, by the way.
Right. He just said, "Here, read this." I had no idea what you were doing with it. I got $1.50 for that. I was like, "What the hell?" So
we overpaid you.
Yeah, you overpaid me. So what we're going to do, first part of this discussion is how to say Patrick Van Buren's last name. Everybody has a different way of saying it. It's like dealing with a piece of apathy. I mean, these guys, they don't even know how to say the last name. We'll talk about his new album, Open Your Eyes, and some of the tracks, right, on Patrick's album.
Great musician.
All right, so we'll be talking with Patrick Van Buren, our special album that will focus on Sgt. Pepper's Be There or Be Square. We do it same exact time, same exact channel on whatever station you're listening to. I don't know. But we have the Zach Martin Show on YouTube, and we're going to try to figure out how to put it in various locations, including, and this is how we're going to wrap it up today, newhdusa.com.